Welcome back, everybody. When you go out and get that first pistol, there's a few items you're going to want to get with it. Now, these aren't mandatory, but they kind of are because they're going to make your gun ownership and shooting experience so much better. I'm Jimmy. This is New to Guns. Let's talk about accessories. Here's the deal, folks. No matter where you go, whether in the gun store or if you're shopping around online, you are going to be stricken. Yes, stricken. I think that's a good term to use here. But you are going to be overwhelmed with all kinds of things that you can get for your pistol. You can get to use with your pistol. It's unbelievable, really, the amount of accessories that you can possibly throw at a given gun. These we've really tried our best because we are gun enthusiasts here at Vortex Edge. So granted, we kind of like this stuff, but we tried our best to whittle it down to what are the most important items that you can go and get with that firearm so you can have a good, enjoyable experience from there on out. You can shoot at the range, maybe take classes, have it ready to go in your safe or your drawer or your nightstand for home defense, whatever it is, you're gonna be ready for it. First and foremost, of course, most importantly, you're gonna wanna get an optic for your pistol. Yes, I do work at Vortex. Yes, we do sell optics.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
Optics are so important though on a handgun. Modern day red dots on optics ready pistols, they go together like peanut butter and jelly, and you are gonna love shooting when you shoot with a red dot. You're just gonna have to trust me on that. I've said trust me a lot in a lot of these videos, but that's because I'm a really trustworthy guy, and I think that this is absolutely something that you're gonna want. So, like we said in previous videos, make sure you're getting an optics ready pistol, even if for some reason you opt not to do an optic right away. They got a plate on top, but you should do an optic, it's ready to go. And in this case, I've got a Razor 6 MOA red dot, and we can talk more about optics selection in future videos, but I've got a Vortex Razor 6 MOA red dot mounted right up on top of my Smith & Wesson M&P. When you buy that new pistol, chances are it's going to come with some magazines, probably 2. Now, if you bought it on a special, maybe they threw a whole bunch of extra magazines at you, and in which case you can kind of skip over this step because you should be good. But if you consider this, with 2 magazines, you have 1 in the gun while you're on the range, and you only have 1 extra. Now, I'm gonna tell you something right now. If you're new to shooting, you really need to know this. Reloading magazines isn't fun. It sucks. No one likes doing it.
You convinced me.
If you can have a bunch of magazines already loaded up, ready to go for your range session, for a class that you're going to, where actually they'll oftentimes request that you have a few extra magazines. We are going to suggest that you get at least 2 additional magazines so you can have 4 total. They may ask that you have that, but just having extra magazines on hand that are loaded is so nice. You don't have to be constantly stuffing mags. Nobody wants to do that. So, couple extra magazines. We just talked about stuffing magazines. You're gonna have to stuff them with something, preferably ammunition. Now, ammunition is a category in and of itself that can be overwhelming, and we're gonna have videos on that, how to select what type of ammo for what type of application. Just when you thought 9mm, it's all made the same, right? You're wrong, unfortunately, but it's not your fault. It's just very complicated, and we will be here to explain that to you in a future video. But if you take nothing else away from this in terms of the ammo choice, just make sure that for your training sessions, as you get better shooting, you're shooting paper, you're shooting steel targets, just stuff you do at the range that isn't self-defense use in some sort, just get an FMJ type ammo. That stands for full metal jacket. This type here is actually called a synthetic jacket of some sort, but it's pretty much the same thing. A lot of times you'll see people refer to this range training ammo as ball ammunition. That may not make sense to you now. I actually don't know where the term came from, but if you see ball ammunition, FMJ ammunition, that's great for range stuff. So you got your gun, you got an optic on top, magazines, and they're stuffed to the brim with 9mm ammunition. Now you need a way to carry the gun around when you're at the range or outside the range even. This is a topic that the Vortex Edge instructors don't even necessarily all agree on in terms of what holster is best. Holster selection is a very personal choice in a lot of ways. I'm gonna give you a few options here and explain the why behind them. First things first, this is universal to all holsters, we are going to recommend that you get something that is Kydex, a fully Kydex holster. What does that mean? That is the material that the holster is made out of. It's basically a plastic material. It's rigid, hard, and it's molded to the shape of your particular firearm, or in some cases, maybe some accessory that you'll have on your firearm. I'm gonna get to that in just a second. Now, these fully Kydex holsters, they should protect the firearm, and very, very importantly, this is what all of your holsters should do. They should cover the trigger guard area. What I'm referring to when I talk about the trigger guard area is this area on the gun right here, the guard around the trigger. We don't want anything when the gun is in transportation, or really when we just don't want the gun to go off, to get inside of this trigger guard, because then it could potentially pull the trigger and we could have an accidental discharge. Not what we want. So it's paramount that your holster is rigid and offers very reliable protection of that trigger guard area. The next thing is you want to make sure that your gun fits into that holster, of course. Now, this is where making sure that your gun has aftermarket support and compatibility is very handy. So lots of holster companies make holsters for the Smith & Wesson, like I got. Lots of them make holsters for Glocks and a bunch of other very well-known, reputable, sold in high volume pistols out there. The next thing is the part where I'm going to give a couple of options, which is how you're going to wear the holster and subsequently how you're going to carry the gun around. Now, I realize talking this much about holsters for first-time gun buyers and owners can seem like a lot. You might think, wow, I just need to actually figure out how to shoot this thing and do so safely, and now we're talking about me basically wearing a gun. You have to put it into perspective here, right? Because we are going to be moving around with our firearm at some point. It's pretty much an inevitability, right? Now, you can take it in a case or something like that to the range, to your spot on the range, and set up there, but you may need to walk down range and you don't want to leave your gun behind you, or you may just need to eventually be walking around with a firearm if you start to concealed carry or something like that. And a safe means of transport is going to be really important, because while holding a firearm, yes, I did have a secret firearm behind there, by the way, but while holding a firearm on the range and pointing in a safe direction, that's all fine and dandy. As soon as you need to move, if you're moving around, there's just a gun out, you increase your chances of maybe accidentally flagging something you don't want to flag, flagging, yourself or a loved one, for example. But you also just are always holding a gun. You might need to do other stuff. You might not want everybody to see that you're just holding a gun and walking around. I'm not gonna walk into Home Depot just like this all the time, you know what I mean? So that's why we feel the holster is very important to talk about. So let's talk about the types.
The gun is just an accessory to the holster, okay?
The first type of holster we're gonna talk about is ITWWB. That's industry speak, or an acronym for inside the waistband. This is traditionally your concealed carry holster. The one that I have here is what's called an appendix concealed carry holster. It is ITWWB. I would wear it underneath my pants. It would go, my shirt would go over it, my garment would cover it, and so therefore the gun would be concealed. You wouldn't see it while I'm walking around. Now, if you're going to be walking around with a loaded firearm, concealed carrying, then in your state, probably you're gonna have to do something beforehand, like get your concealed carry permit, etc. There's all kinds of information on transporting loaded firearms and concealed carrying at USCCA, which is the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. We would highly recommend that you check that out, because they'll have all the information about how your state views what you need to do in order to concealed carry a firearm. But just know that that's generally speaking what these holsters are for. Now, the other one that I have here in my little hidey spot behind the safe is an outside the waistband holster, or OTWB. Now, this is made of the same Kydex material, but in this case, I would wear it on my belt and it would just be visible right there on my side. Maybe I could get a garment over it if I was concealed carrying with it, but it would have to be probably the dead of winter when I'm wearing lots of layers. Otherwise, it is very much visible. So really, this is an option more so for just the range, or I don't know, if you've got a pretty sweet setup in your backyard where you can shoot safely, maybe something like that. Not something people use a lot for concealed carrying. One of the nice things about either the inside the waistband or the outside the waistband in this Kydex material where they cover the trigger guard is that you don't have to wear the holster or your gun when you're transporting it around in order for this to still be a great way to protect your gun and the trigger. So if you're not comfortable with that yet, this can still be something that you get and just have as an added layer of protection when transporting your firearm. And that's kind of where the instructors didn't always agree. You know, in a lot of ways, it is easier to learn as a newer shooter on an outside the waistband holster than would be maybe like an appendix style inside the waistband holster. I get how that makes people a little more nervous. But if you intend to concealed carry eventually, you could store your firearm in the inside the waistband holster and kind of have that part already done as you get more and more comfortable. And then the holster is already bought, you already own it, bam, then you start concealed carrying it when you get all set up and ready to do that. Last thing about holsters, and there's a lot that goes into holsters, as you can tell. I've spent a lot of time on it already. Make sure that they work with your accessories, okay? So we're gonna go into, I'm sure at some point we can talk all about lights, because having lights of some sort, like a handheld flashlight, maybe even a flashlight that actually mounts to your gun, can be a great thing for self-defense or concealed carry, whatever type use, because you're able to identify your target, if it's in the dark, much better with light. So make sure your holster is able to be compatible with that. So holsters that work with a gun that has a light on them are much different than holsters that work with guns that don't have lights on them, because it has to mold around the shape of the overall outline of your firearm. The other thing is, if you get a gun with an optic on it, some holsters, I feel like this isn't really a thing as much anymore, some holsters may not be compatible with the optic. For example, when you go to put your firearm in the holster, maybe they're just not cut out enough and you start running into the front side of your optic. So just make sure that it has what's called an optics cut. If you are gonna run a red dot, that optics cut isn't gonna be an issue also if you don't run a red dot. So it's good just to get one with an optics cut anyway. Related to those holsters, you're gonna have to have a belt that can hold up to the weight of a holster and a gun, especially when you have the gun loaded with ammo in it, it gets heavier and heavier. Your typical thin leather stylish belt, while that looks great on a night out, isn't going to hold up to all that weight on the range. It's gonna be flimsy as you go to draw your firearm, it's gonna be kind of flopping all over the place, which isn't always safe, and it's not fun or enjoyable, it just kind of sucks to deal with. So you wanna make sure that you get a nice shooting belt, something that is rigid. Here's one. This is from a company called Cigara, and it's plenty rigid. You can see here, I can't even get my fingers around it and bend this belt over. That's a good implication that can hold up to the weight of a gun in a holster, but also it just looks like a normal belt. I like that about this one. So if you're not wanting to look super duper tactical out there, then you can get this belt and you can just wear it around too, even when you don't have a gun on, because it looks pretty normal. Last but not least, everybody, let's talk about storing the firearm when you're at home. This is especially important if you got little kids running around, and most notably if they haven't yet been taught how to properly respect a firearm, if they're around one, all that good stuff. It's always just good practice to have your firearm stored away in a spot that little hands can't easily get to them. So something like this. Make no mistake, these safes, you can find them on just about any online retailer. They're not that expensive. Safes like this that are handgun safes are not going to prevent your gun from being stolen if your house gets broken into. I mean, I can just pick it up like that, or I could probably take a tool and get into it, you know, if I was really, really trying. So that's an easy place to store your gun. It helps keep unwanted hands off your gun when you're not around, and it's super quick and easy to access if you ever do need to get to your gun right away. In this case, we have a really easy to crack code on this thing for our home defense classes in the shoot house, but a couple of button presses, it opens right up. It can fit your gun inside, nice and cozy. Couple of magazines, even a flashlight, and close right out. That's pretty much all you need in something like this. Great place to store your gun. So there you have it, everyone. All these items, including of course the ones that we have tucked away in our safe, are all what we would suggest you get with your first pistol. They're gonna make the ownership process that much better, and we feel like it's not too intimidating. Like I said, we're enthusiasts. We tried to pare down all the stuff that we like and whatnot to really the bare essentials.
bare necessities, the simple bare necessities.
And that's pretty much what you see here. Do remember that everything you see on the table, except for the firearm itself, these are all items that can be bought and shipped right to your house. So not all of them have to be bought at a gun store. And in fact, as much as we love local gun stores, trust me, we really do, they may just not have everything that you need for your particular gun. They may have some universal items that don't work as well, yada yada. Make sure you get exactly what you want. Sometimes that's going to be online, but luckily it's pretty easy for all the rest of this stuff. As usual, guys, we want to make sure that this is a zero assumption series of videos. So if I said anything in terms of terminology or phrases that I used here that didn't make any sense, let us know in the comments below. You guys can keep us honest to that. Thank you very much for watching this episode of New to Guns. We'll see you on the next one.
Oh my God! There's a room full of just guns.